All right, hopefully, um, hopefully Zoom's actually working. I'm doing this on a new laptop, so we'll see about it. Appears to be recording audio, which is fine. Not gonna mess around with that now because I just want to get this video out of the way. So I guess more background to that. So during my original Insurgence playthrough, the first run I did, that was on the Mac. So I went through that, and then at some point I updated the Mac, and Insurgence was no longer working. It's just due to the nature of Mac itself and Apple. And funny enough, and I keep remember, and I'm going to, I remember this, and I keep going to say, but it was the day before somebody asked, how are you? It was a YouTube comment. It was, how are you playing this on Mac? And then after that's when I did the research, and I realized, oh wait, the version I just updated the Mac to is not compatible with Insurgence. So if I would have waited one more day, I would have still had my original um, runner playthrough. But definitely glad I kind of put that run and play through the rest and was able to do my second, which is what that leads into, because I was no longer able to play on Mac. I had a decision to make. Do I drop it and leave it entirely, or do I restart on the laptop, which is Windows, so I won't have to worry about compatibility, and then just play through? And that was the decision I made. And that was the second run through, the current run through that I have. So now what that leads into is that laptop actually broke. So what I needed to do was, and again, this was from the last Insurgence recording I did, which was I believe, Insurgence conclusion and future, or channel future. That was the video I made, and that one was like at the mid-May, and that was the last video I made before I took my break, my hiatus, because I needed to go fulfill my duty. But yeah, that was when I last did Insurgence, and that was on the old. Um, that was on the. That wasn't even on the old laptop. I just did a video or an audio recording, I believe, and then pasted an image over it. But so what that leads into now is I was able to get not only the game, the correct core version, because the core version my run and playthrough is on is 1.2.5, but the current is 1.2.7. So I was able to get the correct core, and I was able to get the save data over, which I can show right now. So yeah, we can do that. I just need to get through this real quick. And then yeah, obviously, so this is the save data I had. And again, this is because this is on a new laptop, which isn't broken, as opposed to the old one, which is. So yeah, doing this on a new laptop. And then that raises the question of, what of Insurgence, right? In the past two videos I made, which I believe was Insurgence Future and then Insurgence Conclusion, I basically stated my intentions of basically just leaving Insurgence. I beat the Elite Four second time, beat the Elite Four rematches. Granted, it was on easy difficulty, but due to the nature of the Elite Four, I had to do it that way. So, yeah. But besides that, the reason why I'm just leaving it and not doing anything else is because there isn't really that much to do. In fact, there's nothing more to do story-wise. I did everything story-wise. I only ended up re-challenging or refine the Elite Four because I knew they had rematches. But beyond that, well, again, because besides there being nothing new or nothing more to do story-wise or plot-wise, there also just isn't that much to do in general. The only real thing that's left is going to basically catch all the legendaries, which in all the deltas, which I don't really want to do. It's a painstaking process, and it'll be it just won't be worth it, right? It'll be more pain than reward. Yeah, or just the outcome won't be worth the process. So yeah, basically I just don't view that as worth it. Yeah, for recording at least. I may do that in my own time, but I don't really see a reason to record that. Again, the outcome, like the process is going to be like painstakingly slow and long in order just to get that outcome, which isn't even that much, like more than what I already have. So besides that, there's also the only other thing is Dev Island, which, or at least from what's it called, from my perspective, or at least given what I've seen of Dev Island, basically I would need to raise a whole team from scratch in order to take it down, which I may do again on my own. I just don't view it as worth it. I don't view it as worth it for recording at least. And also you can see how much smoother this looks on the new laptop. Yeah, you can see how much smoother this looks on the new laptop as opposed to the old one. So yeah, definitely an upgrade. But yeah, basically it isn't really worth doing anything anymore. I'm still sticking by that decision that I made in the past two videos, and this should be the last Insurgence video. So, I'm going to put it to rest now. But yeah, so besides that, that was just kind of staying my intentions up front, just in case, Insurgence video, right? Continuation of the series, that's not the case. I'm putting it to an end. Again, it was definitely worth it though, especially during the second run and playthrough. But that leads me into my current point, which is kind of the main part of this video, or the main reason I'm making this video, is I never did a formal review of Insurgents, and I kind of wanted to do that because that's really is the last thing I can do, and that officially puts the question to bed of whether I'm going to continue this series or not. But yeah, I'm going to go through the review now. I don't have any notes, so I'm just going to kind of go. Obviously it's unscripted. All my videos are, so I'm just going to go through, and then because I've got a lot of things to say about Insurgents. So, and I've never really had the opportunity to say so. Yeah, I mean, for review, I guess like first I can go like an overall like rating or score. I used to do that for DDLC mods, and then I kind of stopped. I'm not sure if I still do them, but yeah, basically if I had to rate Insurgents, I give it easily a 8 or 9 out of 10. Yeah, mainly just because of how great of a game it is. Like I've said that multiple times throughout the series. It's a great fan game. Definitely worth your time. How many hours have I put into this? I've put 147 hours, and it was worth every single one of those. So that is, how many days is that? 24. That is close to 6 days, like 6 full days worth of time, and it was worth every single second of it. So that's me just staying that out front, that again, just a great game, ultimately worth every single moment. And then yeah, that's just kind of the overall summary. I'm not gonna like summarize the story or anything. I don't really think that's worth it. I'm just gonna give my own thoughts and opinions, and like on top of everything else. I guess we can like move into pros and cons. So pros are definitely the good parts of the game. So the pros, the first thing I liked was the length. And I know that may seem kind of odd, but again, this is the only fan game I've played. So I'm comparing it to games I haven't even played, but just I'm going to try and look at Insurgence itself. And because the point of this is, so the reason why length is a pro, because I know other Pokemon fan games are shorter, or are generally shorter than Insurgence. Insurgence is kind of like the one notable standout fan game. It may not be the best objectively because I haven't played the rest. That rhymed, but it is definitely one of the longest. And even looking at it in of itself, you can tell it's long by the amount of hours I put into it. The only Pokemon game that I've put more hours into was Pokemon X. That's like around 180, but that's just because, I played that game a lot despite RA finishing it. But the current hours I'm at for Insurgents are upon basically completion. So just now at 147 hours, am I completing the Elite Four rematches? So that shows how long the game is. And then following from that, the length of the game, besides being a pro or like a positive, like it's not slow. The game isn't slow, or it's slow initially up until you get to that initial or that first fight against Yarn. Like the game's pretty slow up until that point. But once you get to that point is when the game starts to pick up, right? That's when you have, that's when you meet Audrey and then fight her twice, dealing with the Abyssal Cult. And then you move on from there to the Infernal Cult, right? And then you have the Darkrai Cult and Perfection Cult scattered like throughout and in between. So even though it's long, right? Like it's pretty lengthy, like 150 hours lengthy. It's not slow, or at least it's not slow throughout. It's only initially slow, but it takes that build up so that you can capitalize on it later when it starts to pick up and you delve into the story, especially when you end up capitalizing with, Knicks and then eventually the Elite Four and champion fight. So definitely again in our pro is that like at no point was I like ever bored playing this game, right? Again, it was slow at the beginning, but then that slowness is almost necessary to establish the background, the exposition, the story, and then when it picks up, it's all worth it in the end. So there's that. That's the second. The third is definitely the third, and I actually remember this because this is one of my favorite parts of Insurgence is that it isn't that much different from, or that's not what I'm, shoot, what am I even saying? Like that was something else. That was, just ignore that. But the third part is how, is definitely the antagonist, the villainous teams. I definitely like the idea of having not even necessarily the cults themselves, but just having multiple villainous teams like going against each other, working against, having that like sort of complex relationship between them, as opposed to simply good guys, bad guys, right? You have you yourself, the protagonist, the gym leaders, whatnot, against one main villainous team. I very much like having you, a couple other people, some people scattered throughout against, you know, just like a shoot, what's the term for it? A plethora of like villainous like groups, like cults as they are. And then like you have this sort of complex relationship between all of them. It definitely makes out for a better story and plot in that you have more interaction between them, right? Like for instance, one of the great interactions were between Yern and Persephone and how they were initially worked together to, basically against the first augur. So that's like just an example. There's like many more. Like and that shows like how you can capitalize on that complex relationship between all these different groups, as opposed to having just good guys, bad guys, or like you have a group of heroes, in the form of the main character, rivals, gym leaders, and then you have the villainous group in the form of whatever villainous team. It's much more complex than that. I definitely think that it is also, it's kind of, what's it called, it's a double-edged sword. If you don't do it right, it can make the story overly complicated and convoluted and just to the point where it makes no sense. Like if you do it wrong, then it could basically like end up destroying, like the complexity can destroy the story itself, in terms where it no longer makes sense. Like you could be like playing through a story and you're like, this doesn't make sense. There's no point for some of these actions and some of these decisions, right? But this Insurgence definitely does not fall into that category, despite the complexity of like the sort of web of relations, which is enabled by having multiple like villainous groups, right? Smaller groups such as the cults and Insurgents. It doesn't fall into that trap of like over complexity, but it's just enough to a point where we can have these multiple like relationships between some of the groups, both good and bad, right? It's definitely in like not even necessary groups, it can be between individuals, and that's where most of them come from. Like I mentioned, Yearn and Percival, and that's individuals, but that shows somewhat of a relation between the Sky Call and the Darkrai Call. You never really see them outright fighting, despite besides the threats that Yearn and Percival make to each other. But yeah, that's just one example. So it could be between groups, usually with individuals representing them, but having multiple villainous groups and teams, right? That's what's enabling all of this, enabling this complex web of relationships, usually between multiple groups, usually both good and bad, generally with individuals representing them. So that's the third point. That's definitely the third positive. Having multiple villainous groups. In fact, I'm not even sure of any other Pokemon, like actual like standard Pokemon game or fan game does that, but that is one thing Insurgence does really well. And again, does not fall into the trap of over complexity to where it doesn't make sense and where there's like no point or no reason for some of the actions taking place other than just for complexity. It doesn't fall into that trap. It doesn't delve into that territory. It stays grounded, but it also has just enough complexity to where you're able to see all these relationships play out in the game. So Yeah, there's that. The fourth thing, and this is what I wanted to get to earlier, but this is obviously less important, but I like how it doesn't deviate that much from like, Pokemon games. It doesn't deviate that much you know, from just like a standard Pokemon game or like the story line or like plot of a Pokemon. Or that's not the right way to put it. Or it doesn't deviate that much from the shoot, there's a really good term for it. From the damn, I can't think of it. Or from the outline of a Pokemon game. Or from the Jesus, there's a really good term for it that I can't think of. It's gonna piss me off. But it doesn't deviate from the not the process. God, there's such a good term for it that I can't think of. This shit pisses me off. Or yeah, no. I don't know. Outline's the best term I can think of for now. There's such a good term for it. I know there's a good term that's a better term, but it doesn't deviate from the damn, this is gonna piss me off so much. Like I'm like this just bothering me, it's bugging me, it's distracting me. I can't move on without it. Processes or outline is the best term I can think of for now. Or the equation, is that it? No. I think that's closer. It doesn't really deviate from the equation of like a standard Pokemon game. Like you get what I'm trying to say, right? You have your standard gym leaders, even though there are multiple, you still have villainous groups, you know, not feigning behind like goodness or whatever. Well, I guess that's kind of irrelevant, but so you still have, your gym leaders, your Elite Four, your champion. You still have your post-game region in the form of the Holland region. You still have, your villainous groups, despite there being multiple, which again, I talked about how that's definitely a positive, definitely a benefit. I wish that's something Pokemon would delve more into, maybe in their next release. But yeah, and then even like the Pokemon itself, right? Obviously, you have your Delta species. However, that's like it's not like something that completely revolutionizes, completely like overturns the current meta. It's more so, what would you call it? Supplementary to the current system. And then obviously you also have things like armors, which also good, like also definitely a good addition, but it's not like completely revolutionizes. It doesn't overturn the current system. It's just supplementary again. And same with like any other like addition. Like one thing I actually like is that they didn't introduce any new Pokemon whatsoever. And like that may seem to be a positive, but the issue you get is the more you introduce, right? At that point, is it still a Pokemon game, right? Is it going to revolutionize and completely overturn, the current meta, right? Like I know or not the current meta, but the current system. Meta's that's like online, but the current system. Like I know there are other Pokemon fan games that like introduce new types, introduce a ton of new Pokemon, right? But at that point is like it within the current, like does that completely revolutionize? Does it completely overturn the system, right? That's already like in place. Like does it become its own game is what I'm trying to say. Because Insurgence adds a lot of new stuff, but most of it's supplementary, including deltas. Like you have deltas, you have armors, you have other things along those lines, new items that are added, right? And then, but it doesn't completely overturn, it doesn't completely revolutionize, what's already in place. And I view that as a good thing, because if it does, then it almost becomes its own game, its own system, its own meta, or whatever you want to call it. If you add too much new stuff that has too much of an impact, like new typings and then new Pokemon, both of which Insurgence stays away from. Instead, it focuses more so on supplementary stuff, like I mentioned, deltas, deltas, armors, other items like added that, although definitely, is a refreshing like new addition, it doesn't have too much of an impact. It doesn't have too much of a effect on, the current system to where all of a sudden everything prior is just now for naught. Again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, I would say. It just isn't Pokemon, if that makes sense. So, or it isn't, at that point, it's no longer like, not necessarily not Pokemon, but it's not like, it doesn't feel as close to Pokemon as it does its own game, if that makes sense. Or it doesn't feel like a fan game as opposed to more so just its own separate entity, or like its own separate its own separate universe, if that makes sense. Like Insurgence, despite how, again, great of a game it is, and how complex and how different it is, it still feels like it's in the Pokemon universe. If we get a completely different game with completely new Pokemon, completely new types, does that really feel like it's part of the Pokemon universe? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at here. And the answer may be no. I'll have to see when I end up playing some other fan games. But yeah, that's definitely like the fourth pro or positive of Insurgence that doesn't. And also another thing to add on to that is character customization. Definitely love that. Love how I can customize my character. That's definitely a positive. Was definitely glad to see that. I definitely utilize that feature in both X and then Sun and Moon and Ultra Sun and Moon. But yeah, definitely glad to see that feature in here because I think this game, I'm not sure if, no, this game didn't come out before X and Y, but it came out before Sun and Moon, I believe. So yeah, definitely glad to see that feature in here. So it's the fourth. I think that's the last thing I wanted to say. I can just go through here just to see if anything can jog my memory. Yeah, I don't really have anything. Also, yeah, shoot, what is it? Where's my Pokeballs? Yeah, we have the Delta Balls. Yeah, and then we have like not the Dust Ball. There's like another fucking Pokeball. I think it's like the Ancient Ball that like has a higher catch rate on legendaries. That's definitely a good addition. But yeah, I mean, we don't really have anything, so I don't have anything else. That was the did the game break? Okay, for whatever reason the game like okay, never mind. I think it's just me. I'm not used to controls on this. Also, why is this? Oh, well, all right, I see. Yeah. But yeah, so besides that, that's the last thing that I really needed to, that's like the last pro. So you've got the 4 pros. One is the length of the game, about how basically it's longer than any main series Pokemon game. Like it takes 150 hours just from start to the completion of the Elite Four rematch. So no even like downtime in there. 2 is how, again, despite how long it isn't really that slow. It's slow in the beginning, but it picks up. And that slowness is necessary to establish the background, the story, the plot, the exposition, so that it can capitalize in when it picks up later. So even though it's long, it doesn't really feel that slow, or it doesn't feel what's it called, or it doesn't feel like lagging, like dragging, if that makes sense. Or it doesn't feel, what's the term, lethargic, I guess is a really good way to put it. Third, the villainous teams, and definitely how having multiple, instead of having one main villainous team, having smaller villainous groups and like in the form of cults for Insurgents enables a much more complex web of relations between both, the good guys and the bad guys, instead of it just being, the heroes with, the main character rivals like gym leaders against the villains, which is one main bad guy like villainous team. Instead you have multiple, like, say you have multiple groups or cults, and then you have like much smaller, like you have more smaller like individual like groups of like heroes and stuff like that, or groups of like good people or people who are trying to do good or whatnot. But again, some of the group, like other like groups and cults or whatnot, they view their own actions as villainous or as good. So you create this complex web of relations between multiple groups, both good and bad, sometimes against each other, sometimes with each other, and usually spearheaded, represented by individuals. And again, the one example I brought was Yaren and Persephone. That was pretty interesting. What's it called? That's probably one of the prime examples of that. But you have many more within the story. It's very interesting. Definitely, if I had to give one recommendation to Pokemon, or to like, shoot, what's the company again? God, I don't even. Well, not Nintendo, but or is it still Game Freak? I don't even know. If I had to give one recommendation, is that they would, in that their next release, they would have multiple like villainous teams. And obviously, doesn't have to be cults. Like that's just one certain. In fact, it's probably better that they don't do that due to like like because of fear of copyright. But definitely having multiple villainous groups, I feel like it's a bold move, but I feel like it'll definitely pay off if they do it right. So yeah, besides that, that was the third one. Again, the fourth one is that it isn't that much different from, a standard mainline series Pokemon game, right? There's a lot of supplementary elements added, which is extremely beneficial in the sense that it uplifts the game to that level or to a higher level. It elevates the game to a higher level, but still feels like a land series Pokemon game where it feels like this game can take place within the Pokemon universe as opposed to if it were to add like tons of like new types, tons of new Pokemon, like a new type, tons of new types, to where like at that point it feels like it wouldn't be able to take place within the main, like within the Pokemon universe. It's definitely beneficial that it add a lot of supplementary stuff to elevate the game to that level, but also not to the point where, it has like too much of an impact, too much of an effect to where it like revolutionizes and overthrows the current system. So that's kind of a summary of all the pros. Now I'm on to the cons because there always are some. The main con is that it felt like certain characters weren't utilized to their full potential, and this is a storyline thing. The others I had, well, they were storyline based, but yeah, this one's more specific since obviously it deals with individual characters. But the main con of the game I found was that it felt like certain characters weren't utilized to their full potential. And there are a few individual ones that I have in mind. Starting with the heroes, or like starting with why do I just use that term to describe like the freaking protagonist versus antagonist, like the cults and like the quote unquote like in like the and like the trainers or whatnot. But yeah, just the protagonist, like starting with that. Definitely feel like Nora wasn't utilized to her full potential. She was in the beginning, and this is how it seemed like for a lot of the characters who I feel like weren't utilized for their full potential, where she was utilized in the beginning when the freaking protagonist, when we didn't have like all our special abilities or whatnot, she was the one kind of guiding us through that, since she also had knowledge of the what's it called, the mystical legendaries, like being attached to people. So she had her role there, she served her purpose there, but beyond that she didn't really have anything. Obviously she pissed off Damien, and then he ended up becoming a human Deoxys hybrid, but yeah, beyond that, they never actually made up. I don't believe they ever saw each other after he became like, after he was undeoxitized or whatever you want to call it, after he was cured of the Deoxys virus. I don't believe they ever saw each other, so that wasn't something where they ever made up. And that's also like, beyond that, once we as the protagonist like kind of knew what was going on, got our bearings, like we knew about the mystical like Pokemon, got all the abilities, she didn't really have serve a purpose in the story, because that was kind of her purpose. And again, that was good for that time being, but it felt like after, once she like assisted us and helped us through, like once she like tutored or mentored us like about that like sort of aspect of the game, once that was done, then she didn't really do anything. And that feels like there is where she wasn't utilized to her full potential, where after she was done with that, maybe she could have taken more of a hand in trying to cure Damien. And this also that'll lead me into some of the antagonists, but it feels like she definitely should have had more of a hand in that, and that could have definitely helped with her feeling as though she wasn't utilized to her full potential. Because again, she was utilized in the beginning, but once that sort of ended, her role could have switched to that. Like she could have been utilized more in that area of trying to find, and she could have been the one spearheading that, since that would be plausible, given that she would feel guilty after, potentially like accusing and like basically potentially like angering Damien, or potentially making him feel isolated right before he got infected with the Deoxys virus. So definitely there is a plausible explanation like to why she would do that. It's just that she didn't. And if she did do something like that, if that was no, if she did end up doing that, then that would have helped with her feeling she wasn't utilized to her full potential. Then if that was the case and she did help with that and she did do that, I could say that she would have been utilized to her full potential. She had her initial role in the beginning, helping us out, dealing with the mystical element of, or like the mystical side of the game. And then once Damien gets infected, moving on towards being the one trying to solve that, because she feels guilty of how she accused him earlier on before he got infected. So that's for the protagonist. Damien definitely utilized to his full potential, both as a protagonist and as a human Deoxys hybrid, and especially in the end when he ended up getting cured and he ended up going on to do what he did to solve relations, or to like, what would you call it, to like ease relations, or like to patch up relations between him and us, and then him and his mother. So that's for the protagonist. Nora is really the only protagonist that I feel like wasn't utilized to her full potential, especially as a rival. Other protagonists like gym leaders, most of them are either dead or just gone or missing, or like just basically non-factors to the story, with the exception of a few like Calreath, Diana. Like those are really the only two, if I'm being honest. And are they the, hold on, shoot, I don't have the I guess I can pull up the wiki right now. Honestly, it's probably not that bad of a bet, because yeah, the gym leaders are like, because obviously you have, well, the Elite Four, they like I believe on only one Pokemon game do the Elite Four actually like have an impact on the story pre like their fights or challenges, and that's Pokemon Black and White. And that's also the same game where the gym leaders also have a direct impact on the story and plot line, like by literally storming N's castle. So just goes to show again how good of a game Pokemon Black and White is. But yeah, let's move to the characters. I'm on the wiki right now on the art computer. But yeah, I want to see the listed gym leaders, because again, the only, or actually Orion had an impact. Xavier didn't do anything. East, he immediately died. Harmony didn't do any, or Harmony had somewhat of an impact. And honestly, yeah, actually a decent amount of these gym leaders had an impact on the story. Like Orion definitely did. Harmony, Anastasia, Diana, Calreath, Adam, like definitely 100%. All of the gym leaders besides Xavier, because he didn't do anything, and East, because he immediately died, had a decent impact on the story. So they felt like they were utilized to their full potential as gym leaders, simply because the bar is set lower than rival characters. And you have our characters, obviously, like Professor Sylvan. She was definitely utilized to her full potential. Like she like pops up throughout the story. And then Gale, we're not going to talk about Gale. Don't really care about that. But yeah, so out of all the protagonists, Nora is really the only one that wasn't seen, that it didn't seem like she was utilized to her full potential. And the quick and the one like quick, a very quick and easy way to fix that is make it so that, after she's done with her, because again, initially, she was like, shoot, what's the term that I just used? I completely forgot it. That she was utilized to her full potential. Like she was initially utilized for helping the protagonist with like the mystical element or aspect of the game. And a quick and easy fix would have been, once she's done with that, just shift her attention towards, helping out Damien, especially since she has a plausible reason for, she feels like she feels bad for accusing Damien before he got infected. So that's a quick and easy fix for that. And it would have been plausible. It would have been reasonable given the story and plot. So that's it for the protagonist. Like Nora is the only protagonist. There are multiple antagonists, however, they feel like weren't utilized to their full potential. The first one is Audrey. This is 100%. And the reason being, because obviously we had the whole Abyssal Cult arc. However, the reason why I don't feel like she was utilized to her full potential was because the choice of, after the Abyssal Cult arc, she never popped up. Granted, that's because she was presumed to be dead. Spoiler alert, she isn't or wasn't. But besides that, her arc went by pretty quick, and it capped off with, her meeting, with the revelation that she's Damien's mother, and that ultimately having her meeting with him in his human Deoxys hybrid form, ultimately with the culmination being her realizing her sort of failure, given that her son ended up that way, but culminating with that, and then her being presumably killed off. But ultimately the reason why she wasn't utilized to her full potential was the ending, to where like the very end of the post game, where ultimately you go back down to Abyssal Base and you realize that she is still alive, and that ultimately her Lugia has been fighting off Kyogre for however long it has been. And then ultimately Damien, having just been cured of his human Deoxys hybrid, coming down and helping you, and ultimately all three of you escaping. The reason why she wasn't utilized to her full potential was, besides the main reason is that they brought her back for basically no reason, right? Like, she had one conversation with Damien, which is basically just her kind of putting her cult past behind her and then just saying, she doesn't care at this point. She just wants to leave, like, get out. And then her, like, Damien helping her with that. But after that, we get like no other interactions with her. She doesn't even interact with us, the protagonist. She only interacts with Damien, and there's no other interactions beyond that. So that in and of itself, like, it feels like she wasn't utilized to her full potential. And in order for her to be utilized to her full potential, you can do one of two things. One is still kill her off, or at least, like, for the time being, after the culmination with her realizing, she failed Damien or whatever, and then being killed off by Kyogre. Like, you can assume that. And then once you bring her back at the end, you have the same exact scenario. However, it's more drawn out. It's more like, it's more drawn out. It's more, what's the term for it? It's more, there's a really good term for it again, but I keep forgetting. Make it longer, make it more drawn out. That's what I wanted to say. Like, make her have a conversation with the protagonist, have her have a more drawn out conversation with Damien. In fact, what you could do is you could have the same exact interaction with her and Damien taking her out without interacting with the protagonist, and then have them settle down somewhere, like in the game. Like, if you go to I don't have, how do you fly again in this game? I don't even know. But yeah, like, hold on, I can just look at the dex nav and then click the map. Yeah, so have them settle down somewhere in the Torn region, like just anywhere, and then make it so that you can go back and have a conversation with them. And that could, as opposed to needing to fit that in, that little cave with Lugia and Kyogre, you can have the same exact conversation where Damien takes her out, and then you can have a longer, more drawn out conversation then. And then I would be satisfied, and it would have felt like her character was utilized to her full potential. But because they didn't have a longer, more drawn out conversation in the cave, or just one later, which would probably make more sense and is probably what I would recommend. And there is one specific city that I believe they mentioned that they were like resided in. I don't even know, but yeah, like, because obviously we know Damien was in Telnor Town with his step parents, but yeah, besides that, like, having that would have definitely felt like she was utilized more to her full potential than she was. So, and then that's one of the options. The other option, and this is a lot more bold, but it's one I would recommend, is instead of killing off Audrey, figure out a way to somehow save her, and then also potentially turn her into a protagonist, or make her, obviously at that point, the whole culmination of that interaction was that she realized the wrong of her ways, and that she realized that she failed Damien, right? And that was kind of the ultimate failure. And that's when she got killed off. But instead of having her kill off, somehow save her. And then because of her realization of ultimately the wrong of her ways and her ultimate failure, convert her into a protagonist. And right, obviously it wouldn't be instant. It'd probably take a conversation with, multiple, trainers like you, the rival gym leaders, stuff like that, and then like a specific group of people, like a subset group of people. So probably like us, Nora, obviously Damien's gone, so it can't be him. And then like the gym leaders at that time, which is probably like Anastasia, Harmony, those two. And then, yeah, or at least those. And then probably that group of people. And then ultimately just having that conversation. And it doesn't need to be immediate. Like, she doesn't need to be immediately like, oh, I realized the wrong of my ways, right? It could be a whole conversation, a long drawn out conversation where they slowly convince her that, yeah, if this is where being a cult leader brought her to, then is that really the path, right? Ultimately, given her ultimate failure and her realization, and then, her ultimate failure. So that's something where it's like, doesn't need to be immediate, but they can take that conversation. And then at that point, Audrey is effectively a protagonist, right? Or if she's not a protagonist, she's still helping out us, like the main protagonist. And then you can utilize her throughout the rest of the story as opposed to just killing her off. Like, for example, she, along with Nora, like that could be the point where she and Nora agree to team up to basically help find Damien and rescue him and then, cure him of that virus. That could be the exact moment where Nora ends up taking on her new role, like that, to where she switches from the, helping the main protagonist with the mystical and like sort of element or side of the game to, trying to cure Damien. That would be a perfect sort of like interplay, or a perfect like what's the term? That'd be a perfect like coincision of like character sort of routes and development. And if that was the case, and you had Audrey and Nora for the rest of the game going about trying to find, trying to help fix and cure Damien ultimately, then it would have felt like she would have been utilized to her full potential. So that's the big thing with Audrey. Definitely, as out of all the antagonists, she definitely feels like she wasn't utilized to her full potential. It also definitely, because, well, even though she ended up being alive, it definitely felt weird with her having been the first main villain killed off. Like, definitely felt weird. Like, I definitely feel like Zenith was a better fit to be a first villain killed off, because he had zero relation to the end protagonist. He had zero relation to anyone pretty much. He was just an evil guy. Like he just had evil plans. Like he had no relation to anyone. He was just an evil guy with evil plans, killing him off. And he actually killed off, a main character too, right? Calreath. So having him would have been retribution for that. And also with him and his ultimate betrayal by the by what was it? The Oracle, who we now know is working for Nyx. But ultimately that would have felt more he would have felt more of an appropriate first kill off than Audrey, who we know had relations to us through Damien and was ultimately wasn't as evil, or wasn't that bad, as bad of a guy as Zenith. Because even though she had her plans for world domination, she wasn't like actively mind controlling people and like manipulating people like Zenith was. It's kind of like comparing Cyrus to Jetsis in a sense. Like, they're both evil, right? But one's more evil, and then one has a relation to the protagonist, which then ultimately becomes a relation to the main protagonist. So yeah, definitely Zenith would have felt much more appropriate of a first kill off than Audrey. And especially if you utilize Audrey in the way that I mentioned, which would also help with Nora as well. But all right, so there's that. Like, enough with Audrey. So that's about Audrey. The next one's and this is the last one I have to say, but Yern definitely felt like he wasn't utilized to our full potential. Obviously in the beginning, even up to like the middle of the story, when after you find him for the first time, when you see him with Persephone, and when you see him making his way to Nyx in the Void Gauntlet, because that is where they had their conversation. Like, Yern was definitely utilized to his full potential there, but once you make it back out of the dream world and Yern gets beaten by a Giratina cultist, not even Nyx herself, but just some random Giratina cultist or whatever they call themselves. I don't even remember, but I believe the official title is like the Hell Cult or whatever. But okay. But besides, like, that definitely felt like Yern should not have lost that battle with the Mega Rayquaza. Like, no amount of just standard Pokemon would enable a Giratina cultist to beat Yern. That just felt like that was the only battle in the story that felt like it was forcefully decided one way against what is logical and rational for the story to progress. So, but yeah, besides that, like, and then culminating with him fighting us for the second time, or fighting us as the main protagonist the second time. After that, it definitely felt like he wasn't utilized to his full potential, because after that, he just completely disappeared from the story. That was our last interaction with him. He had no more, he didn't appear after that, like, at all during the story. There's only one other time where he was mentioned, and that was in Holland, when we realized his original reason of going to Holland was because of Delta, or no, not Delta, but Mega Regigigas or whatever. Yeah, and then the Delta Regis. So that was the only other time from that point on that he was brought up during the story. At no other point in time was he, A, like, did he appear, or B, was brought up. So it definitely felt like it wasn't utilized to its full potential. What would have enabled that was if, instead of, let's say, just giving up and, like, instead of just walking off after we beat him, because at that point he still hated Nyx, right? He hated us and Nyx, but Nyx was the one who was threatening our universe. So if after that point, if instead of just walking away, right, if instead somehow he ends up teaming up with us, like maybe instead of battling, we have a conversation with him where it basically says, listen, at this point, you need all the help you can get. I don't want our universe to be destroyed. Neither do you. I know I'm the second augur and the one who killed your father, but that is, that's beneath us, or like this is beneath what is going on right now, or what will happen if we don't stop it. So, or something along those lines. Like he couldn't, like a conversation along those lines, and the protagonist, obviously the main protagonist, maybe we could even get a choice of going along with him or not. Like we could get a choice along those lines, but regardless, like us, the main protagonist, we'd obviously go along with him. And then Nyx, as opposed to expecting, let's say, just us, is instead us and Yern. And let's say we fight her along with like Garatina or something, because obviously she would need a buff since she's fighting two people. It could be something along those lines. And then we beat her, send her back to her universe, capture Garatina. And maybe in the process, Yern like dies or something. And maybe instead of getting outed, he is instead remembered as, let's say, a hero for sacrificing his life to to stop Nyx and to stop the Garatina call. That would be interesting. He could still get outed and still remembered as the traitor of the whole region, but eventually, even in that, eventually, given that he, let's say, given that he teamed up with us to stop Nyx, right, and he died in the process, he could instead be remembered as like a bittersweet hero in a sense, to where he did what he needed to, almost like an anti-hero in a sense. He did what he needed to do because he thought it was right, even if it didn't align with the views of the Tauren public. And even if they still hate him, they at least recognize that he did something good in the remaining moments of his life. So yeah, and again, granted, the conversation could go about better, and you can kind of work with how you exactly want Yern's death to play out, because him being alone, granted, he could live through it and then just take his leave after that, and it still would have felt like they would have utilized his character to his full potential. But you can play around with the idea of him dying in that interaction, maybe him sacrificing himself to seal Nyx away, like him going to the other universe or dimension or whatever, and then again also playing with the idea of him, whether or not he gets exposed, and then that conversation with us where it's like, look, I understand, he can even fight us and then say well, I guess you beat me, but even though I hate you, I hate Nyx more for exposing me. So, or it could be something like he doesn't even fight you, can say look, I understand, I the second augur, Yern, killed your father, the first augur, Adam, and I recognize that we have fought and have been at odds the whole time we've known each other, but there's something above us going on right now that we need to deal with, or else our entire way of life will be ceased, or our whole way of life will be ceased. It will be gone, or it will no longer cease to be, or whatever, or it will cease to be. It will no longer be that way. But yeah, basically, you can play with the whole idea, but I feel like Yern definitely should have been utilized in that interaction with Nyx. That would have made it much more interesting, as opposed to the cliche, protagonist antagonist fight. It would have been much more interesting. Let's see us team up with Yern against Nyx, she potentially utilizing Garatina to offset that. That would have been a lot more interesting. And yeah, that's actually the last antagonist that I had in mind. Yern, he's the really only Audrey and Yern felt like they weren't utilized to their full potential. Rukra definitely utilized to his full potential. Tane 100% as well. He definitely utilized to his full potential. Persephone definitely as well. Zenith definitely as well. And again, I said it felt like he would have been much more appropriate for a first antagonist kill off than Audrey. So Zenith 100% utilized. And yeah, I mean, there aren't really any other yeah, there aren't really any, or except obviously on Nyx. So yeah, I mean, yeah, but she was also utilized to her full potential, or the Giratina call as being this sort of, shadowy group or organization, like in the background, pulling the strings, like manipulating everything to their own benefit. Definitely worked out in the end. And yeah, that's really it. I mean, yeah, just saying, like, I don't have that's really the only con that I've, or I guess another con is just bugs, glitches, stuff like that, but they aren't rampant to where I'd consider it a con. The only two big ones are are getting soft locked in Insurgent's base and soft locked in the dream world. Those are the two big ones that I've noticed. But yeah, it's not enough to where I'd consider it a con. Maybe if I played this earlier on in an earlier core version where there are more bugs and stuff of the like, then maybe it would be a con, but it's really only those two. And I wouldn't exactly consider it, like, it's not enough to consider a con, basically. But yeah, I mean, besides that, that's really the only con I have with Insurgents, is that those three characters weren't utilized to their full potential. But obviously in a game with many characters, some aren't going to be utilized, but still my complaints are valid and the points that I bring up are valid. But yeah, I mean, that's really it. That was really, like, I've got those four pros, that one con. That's basically my whole thoughts and opinions about Insurgents in my review of Insurgents. It's been getting long. It's nearly an hour. So I'm definitely going to end it. And yeah, just to recap, yeah, I'm no longer continuing Insurgents. This is the end, and this is 100% going to be the last video of Insurgents, because I've already made 2 other videos of this sort, granted not as long because I didn't do a full review, but because I can do a because I'm doing a full review now, I can put it to rest. Maybe after I train up a whole team to take down Dev Island, or train up a whole team from scratch to take down Dev Island, can I continue recording again, but I'm not gonna like record me catching legendary, is not gonna record me training. That seems like too much of a long painstaking process for not that great of an outcome, or not that much of an outcome. So I'm not gonna do it. But yeah, so I'm officially gonna put Insurgents to rest with this video. Definitely, again, great game, 100% worth 100% worth the time, 100% worth all the 150 hours, every single second I put into it, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But yeah, besides that, yeah, it's pretty much all I've got. That's it for this one. Definitely, shoot, where's my mouse? There we go. Definitely glad I partook in this.